We're in Friuli, at San Giorgio di Nogaro, a town that's easy to reach because it's to be found midway along the road that joins Trieste with Venice. The town centre is dominated by the 18th century church dedicated to the Madonna that was built over 3 existing basilicas, the oldest of which goes back to the 15th century. But there are really many reasons for tourist interest in the area, beginning with the numerous and significant archaeological excavations and continuing with the beauty of the natural reserves around the Marano Lagoon. And we shouldn't forget the cuisine either. In this area, it's of a noticeably high quality, together with the excellent, famous Friuli wines. But before indulging in the vices of the palate, I'd like to take you sailing, as usual. In effect, 5 minutes from the centre of San Giorgio di Nogaro stands Cranchi's Marine Test Centre Italo Monzino, a structure that's open 365 days a year and where it's possible to try out all the shipyard's boats. Cranchi has recently presented its most sporting boat, the Endurance 33, with a completely new design, as can be seen from its aggressive profile and the open space layout below deck. Then there's the revelation of a hull, whose waterlines seem to have been designed specifically to express speed on the water, but also comfort when sailing on rough seas and stability of the anchorage. So, all that's now needed is for us to discover the dynamic living characteristics of the latest Cranchi creation, the Endurance 33. One of the most interesting aesthetic and functional features of this boat is undoubtedly the long window that we find on one side. Its aim is to provide light below deck, but it's also very attractive when seen from the outside. Of course, you have to take a bit of care when mooring. The Endurance 33 is a sporting boat, so it's been designed and planned in order to express significant performance. But furthermore, look at the style of this side in a beigey grey, which, when the rays of the sun fall on it, takes a golden color. Functionality and style are in this roll bar that allows you to cover the entire cockpit up to the aft sun deck, to protect it from the sun or to close it completely during the winter season. Then there's a really lovely overhang that's perfectly in harmony with the windscreen, giving it a very attractive line. One of the solutions found by Cranchi to increase the livability of the boat's cockpit is that of moving the sun deck as far to the stern as possible. It even juts out over the bathing platform, but in this way it becomes really very spacious. There's so much space in the Endurance 33 cockpit that there's no need to be obliged to transform any of the furnishings. The table can be extracted electronically from the floor, the sofa is sufficiently wide, and the sun deck is always ready and available. Of course, it's a sporting boat, but it has also been finished in a really luxurious way, as can be seen in the teak that covers the entire floor on the aft platform, on part of the 4 gangways, and which is also used for the steps and the footholds. Above all, there are open lockers to be used in a very practical manner, like this one, under the sofa, where you can throw your wet flippers and face masks to dry. Then there's a very deep mast step that contains a life raft. This is very important because it means that there is a safety vessel that's always ready for use. There are some elements that do not just relate to style in order to express the sporting nature of the boat, but which have also been created with intelligence in order to be light. For example, look at these hatches in high-pressure polyurethane, which are well finished inside, but which, precisely because they have no great weight, are perfect for a boat that aims to be fast. There are some parts of the boat that demonstrate more clearly than others how these designs are created, not just by the architects, the engineers, but also by the technicians who go out to sea, who test out these boats. In other words, there's a united team which manages to achieve, evidently, very high-level results. Look, for example, at this area, at this armchair that is usually used for guests because it's so comfortable. Here it's equally comfortable in the pilot station. In effect, the seat can be transformed into a lower backrest. There's a nice safety handle and even a foothold to be entirely at ease. The position of some of the elements which are accessories but still very important, such as handles and handrails, tell us how much the prototype boat has been tried out. Because it's only by sailing and going out to sea that you can appreciate what the best position is, as in the case of this rubber handle or this stainless steel handrail, which serve to give a real sense of security to the sailor. One of the recurring motifs in all the latest Cranchi designs is the central window here on the foredeck. It's placed precisely in the middle of two sunbathing cushions. Although it effectively limits the relaxation area by a few centimeters, it does provide a great deal of light to the cabin exactly below. There are these two handrail handles that give safety to those lying down at the fore and who want to stay here while sailing. The other feature is that of the mattresses, which are simply placed on the deck. There's no holder into which they're inserted. However, this doesn't present a problem because there are these belts to hold them down when it's windy. With an aggressive profile, a brilliant performance, it couldn't help but have a sporting interior. This is not a cruising boat. There are no cabins separated by the bulkheads, but there's a large open space that gives it a sense of airiness that it's difficult to find on another 33-footer. Despite the height of the build being limited, in order to give a very streamlined profile to the boat, the entrance height is still 1.9 meters. Going towards the prow, the deck descends gently and obviously the height decreases. However, look how comfortable you can be sitting on the sofa. There's a lovely teak table and place for at least 8 guests around it. Then, naturally, when evening descends, this table can be lowered and it becomes a bed with a length of 2 meters and a width of 1.9. On a boat of this type, it's unlikely that the galley will be used very frequently. However, it's been equipped with everything that's needed to eventually dine on board. Microwaves, hobs with pan holders, a sink, a fridge, here below, and then, naturally, in accordance with the Cranchi Berloni style, a drawer with the cutlery perfectly in order. One technical detail which shouldn't be underestimated, here, fully visible, is the indicator telling you how much water is still available on board. One of the strengths of the Cranchi products has always been its price-quality relationship. And that's true of this model as well, the Endurance 33. We can see, for example, the woods used in these internal furnishings. Teak flooring, bulkheads in Durmast, and many finishes and details in Venge. How can they possibly keep their prices down when using such expensive materials? Well, all this comes from the joint venture between two companies, Cranchi, which builds the boats, and Berloni, who prepares all the inside furnishings for these boats. Here is a really original idea of the boat, characterized by such diverse and significant architectural elements which allow them to increase the sense of airiness here below deck. One fundamental element is the very long window which allows light to come in and the gaze to fall on the water outside. The furniture gently becomes smaller so as not to impede the view. Then there is this other feature of the cockpit. On other boats we are generally used to see it closed on the top side, but here it remains open so that the feeling of depth is increased. This area of the boat is used for a narrow double bed that would be ideal, for example, for 1 or 2 children. However, if the boat is being used exclusively by a couple, it could then be used for storing bags, suitcases, and whatever else is needed. As on all other Cranchi boats, the search for space is truly manic. Look, for example, at these below-deck access steps. How many places? One is even with a pocket, while this, on the other hand, is used for, and appropriately gauged to, containing the cushions, which allow the dinette at the prow to be transformed into a bed. On a 33-footer, it's really difficult to find a bathroom of this size, wide, and also, naturally, high. There's a lovely window on the top side and a skylight that jets out over the main deck, and just to avoid any indiscretion, it's been made with obscure glass. The finishing touches in this room are worthy of note, beginning with a shower stand, which is extremely sumptuous, worthy of much more important boats, and continuing with the shower box door, which is plexiglass, and using some really luxurious hinges. The Endurance 33 design is fresh, modern and youthful, and thus follows the most current trends on the market. One of these is that of making life below deck as comfortable as possible. The closed spaces, those inside the boat, have to be as open as possible towards the outside. And here we have, as well as the traditional skylight at the top, the addition of a spectacular window that is to be found between the cushions of the fore sun deck. Then, of course, there are the traditional portholes along the sides. But please note that these have been created specifically on the shipyard's design. They have a triple waterproof seal and then the original details, such as, for example, these blocking levers, which are equipped with an indication of the direction in which they have to be turned to open the porthole, a central handle that makes it easier to use, and finally, a hinge on which there is even the shipyard's logo. The Endurance 33's dashboard is really sporting. It looks a bit like the dashboard of a coupe motorcar, perfectly in harmony with the boat's lines and performance. Let's take a look. There are the two rev counters in full view, as well as the compass, so that we can check the lubber line even when sitting down. The plotter is in front and is accessible without having to move. And here, partially, is a dashboard on which there are the other instruments that are still perfectly visible. Let's see what the controls available to the pilot are. There are, on these two very stylish frames, the switches that are really very close to hand. Then the helm, whose height can be regulated as well, the control levers, and even although there are the stern feet controlling the boat, it allows you to easily activate the propulsion thrusters in order to maneuver in tight spaces. Nonetheless, Cranchi has still preferred to add a maneuver propeller at the fore, which makes mooring the boat even easier, especially when it's windy. What I do find, however, extremely uncomfortable is this trim controller. Although this can't be blamed on the shipyard, but on Volvo Penta, I definitely have preferred to have it close to the levers, if not specifically on the controls, so that you can intervene immediately without having to take your hand off the helm in order to regulate it. Well, before stepping on the gas, here are a few details about the design. It's a hull that's been designed by Cranchi with a slightly different setup to its other boats. A very streamlined stem and gentle wheel, because when you're racing on the water and there's impact with the waves, you need to be as soft as possible so that the passengers are comfortable. Some of the characteristics that are typical of the Cranchi constructions are very important on this model that has a very fast speed. The shipyard states it does 40 knots at maximum speed, so we'll check that out right away. But in the meantime, in order to race like this on the sea, you have to have a light and solid build. The producer obtains this by using the best materials, vinyl ester resins for the outside skin, which is protected by the Snowdy, but makes the hull even more robust. And then, above all, the 40 45-degree crossed bi-axis fabrics, which permit a reduction of the thickness and therefore the weight, and keeps the solidity of the boat high. But even more, there are many elements of the boat that are molded in RTM, light, so that they are well finished but also light. The same can be said for some of the details that have been made in polyurethane high-density foam, with great stylishness and unquestionably very light. The boat is presented both with petrol and diesel fueling. In particular, on this model, we have two 300 horsepower V4 Volvo Penta engines. This is possibly the most seagoing choice, and the propulsion is, naturally, in both cases, with stern feet. Should the owner decide to have air conditioning on board, the diesel can be used both for the engines and the onboard generator. So, basically, this is possibly the most versatile solution. The first approach with the boat should always take place with the control levers so that you can appreciate how to maneuver it. So, with one engine in forward gear and the other in reverse, we can start to see how quickly the boat moves, turning around on itself. Despite there being a fairly strong wind today, we can see that we can manage to spin it around quite quickly. One of the fundamental rules for making a boat with stern feet surf is that of setting the trims in the lowest possible position so that you can decrease the nose-up angle. We've done that now, so we can accelerate and observe the behavior of the boat. The boat rears up in a well-contained manner, but if we want to reduce this even further, we'll have to use the flaps that are series assembled on this boat. Steering sitting down, the view is a bit limited for a few moments, but if we want to rest on the lower backrests, there are no problems. Both for reducing the nose-up angle and for sailing at low speeds when the sea conditions are very bad, we can use the flaps, lowering them completely. In this way, we find that the lowest surfing speed of this boat is 12 knots at 1,700 revs per engine. The units of the 300 horsepower Volvo, the V4 3.71 engine, do not just have the turbo compression, which naturally increases the thrust of the engine, but they also have a volumetric compression, which allows them to maintain the couple very high, from 600 to 700 Nm, for a functioning range that goes from 1,500 to 3,500 revs per minute. In this way, the thrust that the engines can give to the boat is always the best possible. This is the best working regime of the engines, 2,500 revs per minute. At this rate, 22 knots, the consumption is an overall 47 litres per hour. However, we can increase the speed up to at least 2,700 revs per minute. Then, beyond this regime, the consumption increases considerably, but we're still at 60 litres an hour and can reach a speed of 27 knots. One of the most successful characteristics of this hull is its heeling angle. In effect, despite being fairly fast when turning, naturally also due to the type of propulsion used, the angle is never excessive. So, even when we start to make sudden turns, the passengers' comfort levels remain very high. After getting used to the vessel, since this is a sports boat, all that remains is to test its maximum speed. So, let's push the levers down. There's plenty of wind, and these aren't the ideal conditions for trying out the maximum performance, but at 3,500 revs, we're already doing 38 knots. Let's try and raise the trim a bit. 40 knots, 3,600 revs per engine. This is the maximum performance of the Endurance 33 with a full fuel tank. So that's the Endurance 33 test. We've discovered that the boat doesn't just have an aggressive style, but it's also very sporting and can effectively make 40 knots of speed. In other words, it's aimed at owners with a corsair spirit, to whom we would, however, like to suggest one important accessory: the safety switch. This is a simple switch that allows you to turn the engines off should the pilot lose control of the boat. It's an easy item to install, and it can help you a great deal in terms of safety on board.